In this video, I'm going to talk about the inverse trig functions. So let's just look at sine. So sine of theta is equal to some value. Let's call it x. So our inverse definition, remember, sine takes in an angle and outputs a value. So sine inverse is going to go the opposite direction. So you input the value and you get back an angle. That's the definition of an inverse relationship. So this is the inverse relationship. Note that sine inverse of x is not equal to 1 over sine of x. That's not what we mean when we put a negative 1 up there. That is just notation for the inverse function. So let's look at how we might have some of these problems to solve. Okay, so if I say like inverse of sine inverse of root 3 over 2. So I know that that is going to give me back an angle. So this, based off of the inverse relationship, is the same thing as saying for what angle is sine equal to square root of 3 over 2. And if you haven't already watched the video, there's a previous video over solving these types of problems right here. So with inverse relationships, it's the same type of thing, except remember, if this is going to be a function and we plug in a root 3 over 2, we are not allowed to get two values back because then that's not a function. So if I had gone to just solve this problem here, I know that sine theta is root 3 over 2 when my y values are the larger values. So they're going to happen up here at these pi over 3 angles. And sine will be positive here and up here at 2 pi over 3. So based on the previous video, I would answer my angles pi over 3 and 2 pi over 3. But because we have an inverse function, we're not going to take quadrant 2. We're just going to take this pi over 3. So this is just going to be equal to pi over 3. Um, for sine inverse, we are only going to take, a value from here, and we're also going to take a value from here, except we're going to deal with negative angles. So, so sine inverse of negative. So this question, remember, I get back an angle, and this is the same thing as saying, for what angles do I get negative 1 over root 2? Now I know that this 1 over root 2 happens at my pi over 4 angles, and because it's negative, it's going to be over here. I'm only taking quadrant 4, and instead of saying 7 pi over 4, I'm going to say it's negative pi over 4 because I'm going to go down that way. And that's what we do for sine inverse. So this would be equal to negative pi over 4. Uh, tan is the same with the quadrants. We do for tan inverse. So tan inverse is, let's just say, root 3. So that's going to be an angle. And there I'm asking for what angle is tan root 3? Okay. Well, when is tan root 3? That's the same thing as saying when is sine theta over cosine theta equal to root 3 over 1. So I want my sine to be the root 3 over 2 and my cosine to be the 1/2 because those are the things that are going to cancel. So when is sine root 3 over 2 and cosine 1/2, like we just went over, that will be up here at this pi over 3 angle. And so my tan inverse of root 3 is just going to be at pi over 3. But if I ask tan inverse of, oops, tan inverse of negative root 3, well, now I'm in the fourth quadrant. I'm down here. So I'm going to answer negative pi over 3 because for tan inverse, we just do quad 1 where tan is positive and quad 4 where tan is negative. But instead of using the 0 to 2 pi scale and answering this would be 5 pi over 3. Instead of answering that way, I'm going to say I'm going to use the negative angles this way. Um, so let's just talk about cosine inverse. Okay, cosine inverse of root 3 over 2 is going to give me an angle. So that's the same thing as asking which angles do I get root 3 over 2. So remember, this is where x is going to be the larger value. So it's down here where I get these larger x values, which is that pi over 6. And it also is happening down here at 11 pi over 6. But because I have an inverse, specifically because the question actually starts with this inverse value, I only want to get 1 back. So I'm just going to take from quadrant 1 and just give a pi over 6. And likewise, if I'm asking about negative root 3 over 2, I'm going to go where cosine is negative. So it's not negative in quad 1, but it is negative in quad 2. So I'm going to be looking for this angle right here where cosine is negative, which would give me 5 pi over 6. It's also negative. Cosine is also negative root 3 over 2 down here at 7 pi over 6. But because I have this inverse, I'm not going to take any answers that are in quad 3 or quad 4. So for these types of practice problems, let's look at some. So, what's sine inverse of 1? What's cosine inverse of 0? What's sine inverse of 1/2? Sine inverse of negative 1/2? Tan inverse of negative 1 over root 3? Cosine inverse of negative 1. Or actually, let's do, yeah. Okay, so any of these, right? Any of them. You can also say like what's sine of tan inverse of negative 1. Um, let's add one more of those. What's tan of cosine inverse of 1 over root 2? Let me put that nicer over here. What's what did I tan of cosine inverse of negative 1 over root 2? Okay, so those are some good practice problems for this.